everyone, what's going on? Today I am reviewing a book that I actually listened to on audiobook. It's going to be interesting because I have no notes at all because I listen to my audiobooks while I'm driving. I sometimes miss parts because I zone out and stuff, but I think I have a good idea altogether of what the book was about / trying to say. So this is the book that I'm going to be doing. Unfortunately, again, I don't have the actual book, but I don't know how well you can see that, but it's called AD 30 by Ted Dekker. And Ted Dekker has been one of my favorite authors since the dawn of time. He has a style that I just like really adore. He uses a lot of symbolism, a lot of allegories. He just has a really different perspective of looking at things. He does a lot of dark symbolism, which I'm totally really into. Like, he does a lot of weird, bizarre stuff. I find his stories very intriguing, but they always mean something like more than what is on the surface, and so it makes you think and kind of compare and like what parts fit into what I'm thinking and what don't. This one though was a little bit different. This one is just a fiction story about a girl named Mavia who is from the year AD 30. She is from a Badu tribe. They're a desert people. I'm only getting like these pronunciations from like what I heard in the audiobook. So if they're off, like I have no way of knowing. I never read the book myself. I don't know how things are even spelled or whatever, but it was interesting because I had a lot of trouble getting into this book at first because the lady's voice is so regal. It's deep and just like sophisticated, and so for the first couple chapters of the book, I had trouble sort of like paying attention. Like I zoned out a lot, and so I probably missed a couple like important introductory details. I just want to play a little bit. This is what she sounds like.
Chapter 1. The desert knows no years. Here time is marked by 3 things alone. By the rising and the falling of the sun each day, to both bless and curse with its fire.
I actually ended up really liking her at the end. I think her name was Ellen Archer. I really liked her like once I got past just the accent and the regal, sophisticated sound of the voice. Towards the end of the book, I actually really liked her. I thought she played the part really well. Her accent and her voice were just perfect for the character that Ted Dekker drew up, that is Mavia. If you've never listened to an audiobook before, I definitely encourage you to do so. They actually do a really good job. They hire legitimate voice actors. It's almost like I'm watching a show or a movie. So the book opens on a Badu tribe. We're introduced to a character named Mavia, and she is a slave. You have this woman who is a slave solely because she is looked down upon as a woman, first off, and because she had a child outside of marriage. What's interesting is her dad is actually the king. Why isn't she getting more respect? Well, it's because her dad doesn't respect her. She was actually born outside of marriage herself. He hated her because she was the lowest of the low, born outside of marriage. And you're like, well, that wasn't her fault, but that's the way they operated back then. Even her dad's slaves have the right to talk down to her. Like, that's how low she is, which is really amazing. She has no rights. She has no worth. This is the setting of the story. This is the heroine of the book. This woman who isn't seen as worthy of any sort of respect or love. Her father's current wife, she's like one of the only people in Mavia's life that actually sees her and treats her as an equal. She's on her deathbed. She basically gives her a prophecy like, take your son and run, and like fulfill your place, your calling as queen. She's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not a queen. I'm the lowest of the low here. It doesn't make any sense. And the woman died. And then at that point, the problem was the woman who died basically gave that Badu tribe an alliance with another one. And this is where I'm a little bit unclear. So you guys can help clear it up for me if you've read the book too, because I know that she died and that the alliance was broken. Her brother ends up betraying her father by joining with an alliance that the first alliance didn't approve of. Their current allegiance ended up attacking them. This guy named Kyle comes and, or Kyle, like she pronounces Kyle, He comes and he's threatening her. He ends up throwing her baby out the window. Like, what? That is so sad. At that point, I woke up. Like, that is the part where I really started listening. Like, he just tossed her baby out the window. What is going on? So this woman, she's just torn up, and her dad's Badu tribe is under attack, and he calls her over and he's like, you have to take this dagger of Aratos to Rome. She's like, I can't do that. I'm a woman. I'm a slave. I have no worth in the courts of Herod. And he's like, do it. You're my daughter. And all of a sudden her father like is seeing her in a different light because he needs her. She gets 2 servants to go with her, Saba and Judah. Saba is like, he's an African slave that he had. Judah is a stargazer. So it's kind of cool actually. When Jesus was born, the 3 wise men that followed the star to find him, he's a descendant of them. So it's really interesting. We get to see into some of the beliefs and the science behind the stargazers and stuff in this book. Judah is one of my favorite characters in the book. He's an Israelite as well, I think. He should never love a slave, especially someone who's had a baby outside of wedlock and someone who's been born outside of wedlock, but he ends up falling in love with her. Over the course of the book, Mavia just learns her place in the world and what God's actually called her to be, instead of being what the world's told her she should be. The big theme, I would think, is identity and just knowing who you are as a creation of God. God put us on this planet to rule as kings and queens of his kingdom. A lot of us don't see ourselves as that way. Like, I sure don't. We can know all the theology in our heads, but when we go out, we're supposed to just walk in power, knowing that we are royalty and we have pull and say in everything that happens. And so we're supposed to approach life from the perspective that we are kings and queens, and we don't. People start telling us who we are. People start telling us who we're supposed to be, and start telling us what's wrong with us. And that's when we fall away from our true calling and our true identity. So that is what this book deals with a lot. They come to Herod's courts, and I thought this was actually really interesting because I know the Bible mentions a few things about Herod at that time. Like, I know one part that Herod is mentioned is when John the Baptist is being executed. Like, they cut his head off because he was speaking out against Herod's marriage to his brother's sister. But this is where we get all that context, which I actually think is really cool. So she tries a number of strategies to get Herod on her side, and I actually really liked the character of Herod for some reason. It turns out he does betray her in the end. However, I really thought this book was interesting because it really humanized different characters in the Bible for me. Herod was one of them. He had a personality. Sometimes I feel like when we read the Bible, humans are kind of dehumanized a bit because we've read it so many times, or like Herod is just so briefly mentioned and always in a negative light that we just like don't see him as a real human being. He was funny in certain ways. He was smart. He was witty. I actually thought he was a really cool character. It was really interesting getting that perspective. And I know Ted Dekker obviously didn't know Herod personally, so he doesn't know what Herod's personality is like. But it was still just kind of cool, like being reminded that, like, oh yeah, Herod probably actually had a personality. Like, he wasn't just the guy who like did nothing all day until he had to cut off John the Baptist's head. And another interesting character that I actually really thought was cool was Fossa, which was Herod's current wife at the time. She ends up being a really great friend to Mavia. She comes across as one of the girls that you would hang out with on a regular basis. Throughout this whole series, we saw different queens who were just really like kind of rude. A slave woman, like, who are you to come into Herod's courts? Like, they were always like that. They were just on a big power trip. But Fossa wasn't like that. She gave her feasts and gave her like expensive baths and had her slaves wait on her, and they just sort of hung out together. When Mavia was talking to Herod, she finds out that Herod is in love with another woman, which is Herodias. He's all obsessed with actually being married to someone who he's in love with, and that's not the case for Fossa and Herod. They were married to create an alliance between Aratos and Rome. He tells Mavia that he's going to Rome without her. So Judah's trying to find Yeshua. That's his goal throughout this whole book. He's like, I've heard about this preacher, this teacher who has like mind-blowing teachings that nobody has ever heard of. So while Herod's gone to Rome, they decide to go pursue and find Yeshua. All of the teachings of Jesus in this book were taken directly from the Bible, but it's cool because you get some different thoughts from different characters and different perspectives on the teaching of Jesus from that time. When I was hearing the teachings of Jesus in this and listening to the context, like even the people talk in like the language that Jesus was, like that's normal. Jesus brought groundbreaking ideas, but he still talked culturally correct. So I was just sort of thinking like I would give anything to understand that culture more. Like you can do all sorts of studies, but unless you're actually a part of a culture, so unless I actually like time traveled back to Jerusalem back in AD 30, I don't think I would have a full grasp on how it affected that current culture. His sayings were just so groundbreaking. Jesus comes in and he's just like saying things like the kingdom of heaven is inside you. And that was just so life-changing for Mavia, because this is what she needs to hear. Is she needs to hear that there is a kingdom inside of her and she can carry that around with her wherever she goes. So she doesn't have to go and awkwardly pretend she's a queen, which is what she was doing before. She can just go and know she is a queen. I just like had a laugh because back in high school, I had a crush on this guy, and he had a twin brother, and they had this like completely, it was like they had their own personal language that nobody else understood, and it was just like really awkward. I wish I understood all these inside jokes that you guys have, but I don't, so I have no idea what you're talking about. Even their accent and language that they talk in, like the words they use, they were all inside jokes. And so I couldn't help but laugh because that came to mind when I was reading this book. Sometimes when Jesus is talking, it's almost like you feel like he has an inside joke with God. I have no idea what you're saying right now. From listening to these characters' reactions, that's almost like what it was. Like they were listening to him and they're like, what are you talking about? It reminded me of that guy in high school and how awkward you felt. You were just like, what are you talking about? But at the same time, you had a feeling like you just wished that you were in on it. Like you wanted so bad to be in on it and understand what was going on, but you just didn't. Jesus would speak in this language that people were like, I don't fully understand what you're saying. You're making it sound like we should understand, but we don't. Let's just be thankful that we now sort of understand what he was saying and we have some insight into that. Whereas with that guy in high school, I know I'll never get it. Like that will never be a thing that I understand. So, but God made a way for us to understand the stuff that that he was saying that didn't make sense at the time, and because it was just so culturally groundbreaking. Another character that we meet is Sarah, the woman who had the issue with bleeding, which was really cool because again, we're just humanizing all these characters in the Bible that just show up for very short periods of time. She was actually very brave. Like she even decided before Mavia that she had faith in Jesus and she wanted to follow him. That was what was interesting about Mavia. Yeshua just has to keep repeating like, you are a queen. Don't live in fear. But Mavia just is really struggling to really understand that. At one point she's like, I'm absolutely terrified that I'm gonna be the one that doesn't have the faith to follow him, even though I want to. And I could just identify so much with that. Like there's so many points in my life when I'm like, I want to be a certain way, but I just don't. I'm so scared that I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm just terrified that I'm not going to have enough faith to be the one to go when God wants me to go. It was just really interesting seeing like the fear develop. Like it was fear of being fearful. Like it's really interesting just like how complex our thoughts are and how it's like, even if we're not necessarily scared, we're scared that we're gonna be scared. And that's something I so totally identify with. I liked it because it wasn't something that was just like annoying, like why won't you get this yet? It was something I totally identified with in her journey and just watching her like go through this process of learning her identity as a queen. Once they go back to Herod's palace, she has a visit from Nicodemus and warns her like Herod is not where he says he is. He's not in Rome right now. He's actually on the coast with his brother's wife. He's planning to get rid of Fasa so that he can marry her. And there's no way he is going to let Fasa live because the problem is Fasa is his tie to his alliance with Aratos. So if he divorces her, that alliance is automatically broken and 100% Aratos is going to start a war. Divorcing his daughter, that is a personal insult. She knows without a doubt now that he is going to have Fossa killed and passed off as like an accident. He's going to kill her as well because she knows too much. Fossa believes Mavia. They go see Aratos. He's not quite so trusting of Mavia as Fossa is, and Aratos's wife is even worse. Aratos, he doesn't trust her, but he's still willing to let her speak, but his wife is so not. She's like, this girl has to prove herself to us. How do we know we should trust you? They still make her prove herself to them, prove her allegiance to them, and so they want to send her back to Herod. They send her with Saba, but they take Judah. They take Judah into custody. Aratos and his wife sent her to take a bribe from Herod, basically. They wanted her to go to Herod and demand money, like a huge sum of gold, in order to basically like not make war on Herod for what he did. But it was just a lie. Like, they wanted money, but they were also still planning on attacking Herod. They just wanted like a double revenge. But Mavia decides to be honest with Herod. And at this point I was like, what are you doing? Seriously? They have Judah in captivity over there and you're gonna be honest with Herod? Like, what are you doing, Mavia? But she told him, if you give them the money, they will still attack, but it will be like months or years from now. However, if you don't give them the money, you're gonna have war on your doorstep right away. No time to prepare, no time to get troops up, no time to get morale up, nothing. There's gonna be war on your doorstep ASAP. Are people gonna be okay coming to war because you're in love with a woman? If you pay out now, you'll have time to sort of make it look like it's not about this. She convinced him and he paid her out even though she was honest about it. So she goes back to Aratos. She's honest with him. She says, I told him like that it was a lie, but he still gave us the money. I did what you asked. I acquired all of my goals. I finished everything that you asked me to. Aratos's wife still isn't convinced. It's annoying. Like, what is wrong with this woman? She has one final challenge for Mavia. She has Mavia's brother there, and they're going to fight to the death. Like, what is this? She's like, your brother betrayed us. Both of you can't return to your tribe alive, so fight. There's a huge crowd gathered just to watch this fight, and she is kind of spinning it to the crowd that Mavia is the defender of Aratos. She's here to kill Maliku. And like the whole time I'm like, oh man, like what is Ted Dekker gonna do to write this in a way that's not gonna end cheesy? Like, I don't want her to all of a sudden be like an expert swordsman. Like, that would be really stupid. So I was just like really curious to see what Ted Dekker was going to do to get her out of this situation. She basically was almost killed by Maliku. It was like almost a Game of Thrones moment, like Red Viper versus the Mountain. He was too busy running his mouth to still defend himself. Maliku had Mavia, like he was in a position where he could kill her, and he was too busy running his mouth to finish her off. Time almost came to a stop for her, and she all of a sudden had this vision of what she really truly was, which was a conqueror and a queen and a warrior. And so when she stood up, she overtook Maliku. From what I could gather, he kept taking strikes at her, and she all of a sudden had like supernatural strength. Like, she was just like deflecting it and like dodging it. And do you like my dodging? She shouldn't have been able to be dodging this stuff, but she was, and it was just like God supernaturally gave her the ability. I'll say okay, Ted Dekker, I'll take it. Usually I don't really like this kind of stuff when books go in these directions, when it's like a matchup that is so obviously like, it's like there's no way in real life that would ever turn out. Since God is in play here, that's the whole point of the series, is that you don't have to be afraid because with God, all things are possible. You don't have to be afraid because with God, you can attain anything. God will fight for you. That's the whole point, is that you don't have to be amazing on your own. You don't have to be a warrior on your own. God will fight on your behalf. And so that is what happened at this part. The kingdom that was within Mavia fought on her behalf. In the last moment, she was looking on him, and people were calling out for her to kill him. But she decided to extend mercy. She drew a blade across her hand, and she said, I'm extending mercy. His blood has been paid. It has been covered. I drew my own blood in place of his. She becomes the queen of the Badu. Aratos and his wife sent her back with their blessing and with their allegiance and their respect. And my question is, what happened to Judah? He's still in captivity? Like, where is he? She mentions like we're heading back toward Yeshua, toward Judah. I'm like, where is Judah? Like, I thought Aratos had him in prison. I don't know where Judah is, but I guess there is going to be a sequel called AD 33, and I am fully expecting to know what happened to Judah, because he's like such a nice character. He's just such a sweetheart. Judah saw that part of her that was a queen and that deserved to be loved. He was captivated with her, and I loved their romance. She said, Judah is a stargazer, and he found the stars in my eyes. That is just so beautiful. Like, he studies the stars. She was like his ultimate star. Like, that is so cute. Like, that's just so cool. Having the character of Judah there to be like one of the first ones to see that in Mavia. I'm excited to see where this goes in AD 33. I give this book, I'm going to give it probably an 8 out of 10. I felt like even when I was listening to it, I was like, I don't know if I have a whole lot of things to say on it. It probably didn't help that I would zone out and I didn't know like all the ins and outs of the book. From a Christian standpoint, there wasn't anything like super shocking or new there, but it's always a good reminder to have like stories like that just ingrained in you and be reminded that you are more than you think you are. The world has a way of beating you down, and so books like this are just really awesome. I did really like just the different spin from a Ted Dekker standpoint. I thought this was a new thing for him. It wasn't like all allegory or symbolism. It was just a straight up story about a woman who lived in the time of Jesus. And I really appreciated the amount of research that clearly went into this book. He made a note that he was very careful to tell a story that worked with the historical data that supported it. You could tell like he really knew his stuff, his history, and what it was like back in that time past what we may read in the Bible. So it's clear that he's delved into extra research on this, and so I really appreciated that from him. Seeing a story told from both his perspective and a different perspective, which is the Bible. So he brought those two together, which I really enjoyed. If you've read it, let me know in the comments. I want to know what you thought of it. If you can fill in any plot holes here for me, that would be awesome. I know eventually I'll read the book again, but not right away. Give me a shout on Twitter. I want to get involved in a discussion with you. So if you like Ted Dekker as much as I do, I want to hear about it. Thanks for watching.